Hello and welcome to today's lesson. In previous lessons, we've looked at evolution and natural selection, and we've also looked at the evidence for Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection. In today's lesson, we're going to be looking at extinction and the fossil record. So inside your exercise books, you need to write the title, Extinction and the Fossil Record. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to define the words extinction and fossil. You should be able to explain some factors that can cause a species to become extinct, and you could be able to evaluate the fossil record. So let's start today's lesson with a keyword, and as always, all keywords in my lessons are written in green. We're going to start by defining the word extinction. Extinction. Now, extinction can be defined in biology as the elimination of all members of a species. Okay? So, extinction can be defined as the elimination of all members of a species. Now, what this means is that that species can no longer be found anywhere on Earth. Okay? So it's not a case of, oh, they're not in the UK anymore, but they're still found in Indonesia. They have to be gone from everywhere. Okay? So we can put in red underneath that in order to be classified as extinct, there can be no more of the species found anywhere in the world. Found anywhere in the world. Okay? So if there's a single individual of that species still found, it's not technically extinct. It's only extinct once they are all gone. Now, the fossil record, which is something we'll talk about later, shows that there's been at least 5 mass extinctions. So we can say that the fossil record shows that there has been at least 5 mass extinctions. At least 5 mass extinctions. Okay? Now, what we mean by a mass extinction is something like the Ice Age coming. That means where most life is wiped out on Earth. Only a small number of species survive. So we can put comma where most life on Earth was wiped out. Okay? Now, there are lots of different factors that can cause the extinction of a species, and we need to talk about each one. So we can say that there are many factors that can cause extinction. Okay? So there are many factors that can cause extinction. The first one we're going to talk about is changes to the Earth's environment. Changes to the Earth's environment. Changes to the Earth's environment. Now, this can include warming or cooling of the Earth, such as global warming, changes of the seasons, changes in the ocean's currents, and the moving of continents. It's actually believed that all of the continents of the Earth were originally one giant supercontinent known as Pangaea, and it split apart. This could have caused an extinction of species that lived in particular climates. So we can say underneath here that these include the warming or cooling of the Earth. So warming / cooling of the Earth. It includes changes in the seasons or ocean currents. So changes in seasons / ocean currents. And it can also include the moving of continents. So moving of continents. Another way that organisms can become extinct is through natural disasters. So natural disasters. Now, what we mean by natural disasters are such as asteroids hitting the Earth, which is a theory as to how the dinosaurs went extinct, or it can include things like volcanic eruptions. So we can say asteroids hitting the Earth, we can put volcanic eruptions, we can put things like tsunamis, earthquakes. These are all natural disasters. Tsunamis, earthquakes. These are all examples of natural disasters that can wipe out living things, causing extinction. Another way is due to other species. So other species can cause other species to go extinct. So other species. And we can say that they can be outcompeted for resources. So we can put next to this competition for resources. That's not how you spell resources, is it? And what we mean by that is, for example, all living things need certain things to survive. So water, for example. If another animal is outcompeting another animal for water, the one that can't get the water will die. Okay, something we'll talk about in future lessons. And we can also say new predators. So if we add a new predator to an area that eats all of a certain species, this can make them extinct. Humans have eaten lots of animals into extinction. The giant tortoise on the Galapagos Islands, I believe, was eaten into extinction by sailors. The final one is the introduction of new diseases. So the introduction of new diseases. Okay, diseases, that's pretty self-explanatory, can send organisms extinct. Now, ultimately, organisms will go extinct if they can't get the resources they need to survive. And I'm going to put that in red because it's important. Organisms will go extinct if they cannot get the resources they need to survive. Okay, so extinction is the elimination of all members of a species. In order to be classified as extinct, there can be no more of the species found anywhere in the world. The fossil record shows us that there has been at least 5 mass extinctions where most life on Earth was wiped out. There are many factors that can cause extinction: changes to the Earth's environment, such as warming or cooling of the Earth, changes in the seasons or ocean currents, and the moving of continents. Natural disasters such as asteroids hitting the Earth, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, earthquakes can cause extinction. Other species, which create what's known as competition for resources, and new predators can cause extinction, and introduction of new diseases can cause extinction. Ultimately, organisms will go extinct if they cannot get the resources they need to survive. So, let's have a think about the second part of this lesson. The key term that we need to define to begin with is a fossil. A fossil. Now, if we were in lesson now, I would ask you, what is a fossil? And I guarantee you that somebody would go, the bones of a dead organism. Fossils don't actually consist of bones. They're an imprint of the hard parts of an organism. They're not necessarily the leftover bones. So we can define a fossil as the remains of an organism that lived millions of years ago. That lived millions of years ago. Okay. Now, as I says, they do not consist of the actual bones. Okay. Fossils are usually formed in mud, silt or sand when there is no oxygen present, so that microorganisms do not decay the hard parts. So I'm going to put underneath here first in red that fossils show the hard parts of the organism. And for that, what I mean is that it shows bones, it shows teeth, shell, woods. So bones, teeth, shell, and wood. These are all things that would be shown in a fossil. Okay? Now, we was saying that, and we can put underneath, that they are formed in mud, silt or sand, with no oxygen present. Now, it's important that there's no oxygen present, because if there was oxygen present, microorganisms such as bacteria would feed on the body and break it down before it could become a fossil. So we can say in brackets, otherwise, don't want that, close brackets, otherwise, microorganisms would feed on the body or feed on the remains before it becomes a fossil. Okay? So microorganisms, if oxygen was present, would feed on the remains before it becomes a fossil. Now, as I said earlier, when you look at a fossil, you're not actually looking at the bones, you're not actually looking at the teeth, you're looking at minerals that have replaced those parts of the organism. So we can say that, and I don't want that colour, I wanted one of these. We can say during fossilization, the bones, teeth, shells, or wood of an organism are replaced with minerals. Are replaced with minerals. Okay? Now, at the same time, we can see fossils which are actually footprints or burrows or spaces that have been left by roots. So fossils are not always like bone and wood and things like that. If you look at the picture at the start of this, I did have a starter which I would have used if we were in lesson and asking what these are. And these are actually imprints of where trees once were. We can clearly see that this is where the trunk would have been of each tree, and it would have grown straight up in the air. This is therefore classed as a fossil because it's the remains of an organism from millions of years ago. So we can say that imprints of footsteps, burrows, and spaces left by roots are also fossils. Okay. Now, we can tell the age of a fossil by how deep we find it in the ground, and that's shown by this diagram here. Okay. The deeper something is found in the ground, the older it is. So I want you to imagine that an organism dies in the water. A fish dies millions of years ago. And when it dies, it sinks to the bottom of the ocean and lays on the base of the sea floor. As its body starts to decay, it becomes covered in more and more sediment. Only the soft parts of the organism decay, whilst the hard parts begin to be replaced by minerals. When this happens, another fish dies on top of that one, and the same happens to that one. And over many years, we get these different layers of sediment on top of the remains of each organism. And these are then found deeper in the ground as the years go on, because if another fish dies here and millions of years pass, this fish fossil will be found in this layer, whilst the older one is found deeper down. Now, of course, this can be distorted by the Earth, by geology. We can get certain parts of the Earth being lifted up so that older layers are found nearer the surface in certain areas. So if you were to drill that way, you would get to the older surface sooner than if you were to drill that way. Okay. We can also get a split in the ground, which can separate parts of a fossil, meaning that this fossil here would be exposed if you were to walk up the hill to look at it. So, we can make that a bit smaller. If you want to study that diagram a bit more, you can. It's on the lesson PowerPoints that I've sent out to you. And we can say, we can tell the relative age of a fossil by how deep it is found in the ground. And then we can say, I'm going to put in red, the deeper the fossil, the older it is. Now, of course, this isn't a very accurate way of working out exactly how old a fossil is. If we want to work out how old a fossil actually is, we can use something called radiometric dating. And that's our final keyword today. Radiometric dating. Now, radiometric dating can be defined as a method of determining the absolute age of rocks. So, a method of determining the absolute age of rocks. Now, this is important because we can use it to determine the actual age of a fossil. So we can put underneath here, can be used to work out the actual age of a fossil. Now, you don't need to know how that works, you just need to know about it. So, a fossil is the remains of an organism that lived millions of years ago. Fossils show the hard parts of an organism, such as the bones, the teeth, the shell, and the wood. They are formed in mud, silt and sand with no oxygen present so that microorganisms can't feed on the remains and break it down before it becomes a fossil. During fossilization, the bones, teeth, shells and wood of an organism are replaced with minerals. Imprints of footprints, burrows and spaces left by roots are also fossils. We can tell the relative age of a fossil by how deep it is found in the ground. The deeper the fossil, the older it is. However, we can get an actual age for a fossil by using something called radiometric dating, which is a method of determining the absolute age of rocks and can be used to work out the age of a fossil. So, you should now be able to define the words extinction and fossil. You should be able to explain some factors that can cause a species to become extinct, and you should be able to look at a fossil record and determine which ones are older and which ones are newer. Remember, the lower down in the ground a fossil is found, the older it is. Should you have any questions at all about this lesson, please do not hesitate to get in contact with me via the usual means. If not, I will see you in the next lesson. Thank you very much.